All right, Wags is here. Let's get to the new Jack Adams Award favorite. I want to say, Daniel is brought to you by Wendy's. More specifically, he's brought to you, he doesn't even know this, by the Wendy's Daily Face-Off Survivor Pool game. Every All-Star needs a sidekick to support them, just like Wendy's meal needs a 6-piece of nuggets. Like Elias Pettersson and Daniel Wagner. And right now, Wendy's is teaming up with Daily Face-Off Survivor to bring you weekly prizes like free nuggets, burgers, and more. So if you think you're an expert in all things hockey, prove it. And if you aren't already, start adding a 6-piece to your Wendy's order for just $3.49. It's a dynamic duo you never even saw coming. Sign up for Daily Face-Off Survivor Pool Fantasy today, sponsored by Wendy's and the Wendy's app. Let's bring him in. Published author, award-picking journalist. Have you won an award, Daniel?
I actually have. I've won a couple of BC newspaper awards, silver and bronze. No gold awards for me yet. But yes, I am technically an award-winning journalist.
Award-winning journalist, published author. Look at this guy go. And like I said, the front runner for the Jack Adams Award. Wags, can you please take our listeners through your question to Elias Pettersson heard around the world? And hey, it got him going. Has he thanked you yet?
Like a royalties check.
I'll take 0.1% of his next contract. I'm not asking for much. No, I asked a dumb question, or rather I asked what would have been a good question in a dumb way. That's all that happened, really, is that I was a little too blunt with my question for him. I basically said, hey, you stopped skating. Why aren't you skating? Why don't you move your feet? Why not? Do you need a reminder to move your feet? At least that's how it came off, I think. Where really what I was trying to get at is sometimes we see elite players like Elias Pettersson, they stop moving their feet. And why is that? And how do you get back to a place where you're moving your feet again? I was really trying to ask more of a process question. And instead it came off as more of a dumb reporter trying to tell the elite hockey player how to do his job. And
he clearly needed it. Like I thought it was.
He needed the reminder, apparently.
Absolutely, I thought it was a good question, Wags. I thought it was a good question.
I wanted to ask you. You wrote a fantastic article about a day or two ago, discussing how in the Canucks locker room, how they're balancing trying to maintain a business-like approach with also trying to have fun and enjoy the season they're on after years of miserable losing. What were some of your main takeaways from having conversations with a bunch of players on how they're balancing having fun and enjoying the season with the business-like approach?
Well, I've found it really interesting how the Canucks have kind of put up this very, stoic front. When you talk to them after a game, they're very focused on not getting too high, not getting too low. So even after a great win and you talk to them, they're still like, oh, well, there's things we need to work on. We'll look at this in the video room after, and we'll try to get better. It's like, well, you just won 5-0. Are you happy about that? Is that a good thing? Are you having enough fun? I guess that was kind of what I was getting at when I talked to them, is like, we don't necessarily see you enjoying this season. I think Canucks fans are definitely enjoying it. Maybe we see them celebrating goals and being very excited in that moment, but like, do they really recognize just how good this season is? And of course they do. Of course they do. And what I got from them was that, yeah, they're having a lot of fun in the room. I really like Conor Garland's response, where he basically said, like, this is the most fun I've ever had in a season. And that makes sense if you look at the seasons that he's previously had with the Coyotes and the Canucks. Yeah, this should be the most fun he's ever had. But like, that seemed to be a similar refrain from a lot of the players. Like when I asked Tyler Myers, just kind of tongue in cheek, like, this is more fun than the last couple of seasons. He's like, yeah, just completely deadpan. It's like, yeah, a little bit.
Just a little.
And I think it's kind of interesting that maybe this season we haven't seen that much of that side of the Canucks. It's been all business in terms of how they present themselves to the public, whether it's to the media or to the fans. Like it is just a very stoic business-like approach. We're going to take each game like one day at a time, or we're going to look at it in practice and get better, work on what we need to work on. And it's like, well, yeah, but did you enjoy hitting Victor Olofsson, Quinn Hughes? Like, was that fun? Like, there's a certain aspect of that where I think maybe this is just my perspective. I think the fans would like to know that they're enjoying themselves. They are having fun. And I really liked how Ian Cole, I had a really great conversation with Ian Cole about this, and maybe like a quarter of the conversation I had with him actually made it into the article. But where he basically said, yeah, you can goof off, you can joke around, you can do whatever it is that gets you in the right headspace for a hockey game. Because honestly, a lot of players need that kind of joking around, goofy aspect of things to loosen up and to relax ahead of what's about to be a very high pressure, high intensity situation. You need to have that looseness. And he basically said, do whatever you need to do. If it's 7 o'clock and you're joking around, fine. 7:05 and you're still goofing around, fine. 7:07 and the puck drops, it's business time. And I really like that perspective where it was just do whatever you need to do, goof around, have fun. But when it's time for business, be mature, be a pro, be an adult. We're going to get down to business.
That's interesting, especially coming from a guy like Ian Cole, who's just, been there, done that. I also wonder how much of that comes from Rick Tocchet as well. The coaching staff, those guys have definitely been there, done that. Wags, moving to last night's game a little bit more, in all seriousness about Elias Pettersson, what did you think of his game? 3-point night for him. What have you thought of his game recently, and especially compared to last night?
Well, I think last night was a really good night for him. He was moving his feet, and I think he does it. The interesting thing about that specifically, I actually had a really good conversation with Conor Garland about that process side of things, of why players stop moving their feet and how you get back to that. And he said in his perspective, from his experience, when he stops moving his feet, it's because he's overthinking things. He gets the puck and he's thinking about what he needs to do instead of just acting on instinct. And so when he's trying to think and process through all of his options, his feet stop moving because his brain is moving too much, if that makes sense. And I had a similar response from Rick Tocchet, where he was saying, like, if you don't know before you get the puck what you're going to do, you're not going to move your feet, because you're going to be thinking in that moment of what you need to do instead of thinking 2 seconds ago, oh, this is what I'm going to do as soon as I get the puck. And he talked about it in terms of like a young player like Vasily Podkolzin. We've seen that from him, where previously he would get the puck and then go, oh, well, now what do I do? And kind of freeze. Whereas now he's a little bit more free, a little bit more loose. He's thinking of what he needs to do ahead of time. So as soon as he gets the puck, he's already moving. He's already getting his feet going. And so I think with a guy like Elias Pettersson, he's very smart. He has more options available to him than any other player on the Canucks, in my opinion. So maybe there is an aspect of overthinking things where he's processing too many options instead of just playing freely, playing on instinct. And Tocchet mentioned that as well, that playing with two guys like Conor Garland and Niels Höglander, who have a lot of energy, they're a lot of fun to play with. He basically said, go out there and have fun. And I think against the Sabres, he went out there and had fun. As silly as that sounds, I think he was playing with his mind a little bit more clear, a little bit more free. He was having fun with a couple of line mates that are a lot of fun to play with because they keep their feet moving. They play with a lot of energy. It was funny, though. There was that one moment where Pettersson made that beautiful deke behind his own back to gain the offensive zone. But what did you see as soon as he finished making that deke? He stopped moving his feet and he went into a coast, and the man that he had just gotten around caught up to him and checked him. And it's like, maybe if he had kept moving his feet, maybe he needed a reminder. I don't know.
Needs another Wags bump. He got the Wags bump last night. He needs another one. No,
it's more that I don't think players hear all the time, move your feet, move your feet, move your feet. Coaches are constantly telling them that. He doesn't need a reporter reminding him of that. That's for sure.
Disagree.
Talked to Conor Garland about it. He said that he gets a text before every game from his parents reminding him to move his feet. So it's like, they hear it from all angles. So it's not that Pettersson needs a reminder to move his feet. It's just when you stop moving your feet, it's more likely to be a symptom of something else that's going on, overthinking the game, playing with too much going on in your head. Other factors come into that. I think Pettersson had a great game. I think he can be even better. That's kind of what I was trying to get at. Is like, we've seen him take over games, and we haven't seen that from him recently. In times when the Canucks have kind of needed a star to step up and take over a game, he hasn't done that yet. He hasn't done that recently, at least. And I think a lot of Canucks fans want to see that from him, especially knowing that he's got this big contract coming that's putting him up in the upper echelon in the NHL. You look around the league and you see that from those kind of players. You see Nathan MacKinnon just take over a game. You see Austin Matthews just take over a game. And I think Canucks fans really want to see that from Pettersson, and he's not going to do it in the same way as those players. And I think that's there's a disconnect there as well, that fans would really like to see Pettersson take over a game in the same way that MacKinnon does. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's more likely to do it in more subtle ways, in using more of his two-way game, making better defensive plays to control puck possession. And we haven't really seen that recently. And I think he's capable of it. And hopefully, as we get into the playoffs, we see more of that, because it's a long regular season. This is a situation that Pettersson hasn't really been in. The one time that he made the playoffs with the Canucks, it was a shortened season, so we didn't see how he deals with games 62 to 82. So I think that is part of it. He's facing a situation, more pressure, playing for a team that's first in the Western Conference with everybody else in the league gunning for him. And I think he just needs to, as Tocchet said, pop the seal and find that extra gear that he has. We know he has it. And we know he's capable of taking over games. We just want to see it. Canucks fans want to see him do it.
Big picture, we haven't had a chance to have a conversation with you about this team as a whole. I wanted to get your take on how you view them relative to some of the other top teams in the league as far as their playoff chances. Like, what are your expectations for this team once we head into the playoffs?
Well, I think the expectations have to be simultaneously kept in check, but they should also be pretty high. They made a bold move, trading away their first round pick and a top prospect in Hunter Brzustewicz to get Elias Lindholm. That's an all-in move. Maybe they didn't do enough at the trade deadline in some people's opinions, but they were somewhat restricted in that regards. But if you're going to make that kind of trade, if you're going to make the moves that they have to put this team together that is at the top of the Western Conference, you have to expect they're going to win a playoff round. Maybe they're going to win 2 playoff rounds. That should be the expectation. And I think they're capable of it. I think, as I said, Pettersson is capable of taking over a game. JT Miller, when he's on his game, is a force. Especially we saw on the power play last game. He created grade A chance after grade A chance after grade A chance. He's capable of, again, like Pettersson, taking over a game. You got a guy like Quinn Hughes, who is right now the best defenseman in the NHL. He was dominant last night. Shots on goal were 12-2 for the Canucks when he was on the ice at 5-on-5. That's bonkers. He tilts the ice, I feel like, more than anyone else in the league comparative to his team. And so when you've got players like that, and you've got a goalie like Thatcher Demko, who's going to be coming back and hopefully fully healthy and well rested, they are capable of winning a playoff round, winning 2 playoff rounds, maybe even going further than that, because they have that star power, that they have these players that are capable of taking over games and taking over a series. You look at the playoff bubble, Bubble Demko, as he hates to be called. But Demko is capable of winning a series. Pettersson is capable of winning a series. Miller is capable of winning a series. If any of those players go off in the playoffs, the Canucks could go really far. If they don't, or if other opposing teams keep them in check with their strong two-way players, their checking lines, if they keep those star players in check, I don't know that the Canucks have the depth to make up for that. So that's kind of where I stand with the Canucks right now. I think they are perfectly capable of going on a long playoff run if their stars come through. I don't know that they have enough depth if their stars can't.
Told you, Harm. Yesterday, Harmon said they shouldn't trade every pick they have, but you clearly agree with me.
I don't know about that.
I laid on a whole Ponzi scheme. How your picks just keep refreshing every year, right? So just keep moving them out. Every year you're gonna have new ones, so just keep moving them out.
Is that not the Vegas Golden Knights?
Exactly. Yeah, let's not be like the Vegas Golden. Come on.
Yeah, the Vegas Golden Knights might miss the playoffs, which would be the funniest possible thing to happen this season. That's
true, but they make playoffs almost every other year. So, anyways, it's the Quads model. We'll call it. We don't have to call it Vegas. Daniel,
betting model.
This book. Tell me about this book that I'm still waiting for my signed copy of. But this book that you wrote about the Vancouver Canucks draft history. First of all, tell people about the book.
Okay, the book is On the Clock: The Vancouver Canucks History at the NHL Draft. Yeah, so it's coming out next week, which is just absolutely wild. I still don't have my copies of the book, by the way. So if you don't have your copy of the book, hey, that's not my fault. I still don't have my copies yet. They're still in the mail. But I have seen it in person. Our friend Patrick Johnston brought it up into the press box, and that's the first copy of the book that I've signed, which is
How did he get one? How did he get one before everybody else?
I think he got a promotional copy from like my publisher, actually. But a bunch of people who pre-ordered through different like independent bookstores have gotten theirs early too. So a bunch of people. I don't know. I'm sorry, it's not my fault. But like I said, I don't even have my copies of the book yet, so you know it's still coming. But yeah, I'm super excited about this. It took quite a while to write, but I'm really excited for people to read it. There is a book launch, book signing event on March 30th at the People's Co-op Bookstore at 7 p.m. So if anybody wants to come out to that, you can get your book signed, Quads.
I'm coming.
Yeah, so it basically goes right from, the spin of the wheel in 1970 that lost them Gilbert Perreault. It goes right from there, right up until, Elias Pettersson and Quinn Hughes. It doesn't cover like the most recent drafts because, there hasn't really been enough space to kind of see what's coming out of those drafts to really talk about them. But yeah, it covers decades of Canucks draft history. Mostly the highs. There are lots of lows in Canucks draft history, and I think we're all well aware of those. A lot of the stories I found out from some of the drafts that didn't go well for the Canucks, it usually was a case of, oh, this guy was good, then he blew out his knee and couldn't play hockey anymore. And it's like, well, that's not really a fun story.
Yeah.
That's not... it's not really an interesting story to go, hey, they found this guy and they were really excited about him, and then this horrible thing happened to him. It's
okay,
like,
two-part.
That's lousy.
Two-part question then, Daniel.
Sure.
You don't have to tell me the most interesting story from the book because I'm sure you want to leave something for readers and for people to go buy the book and read it. Most interesting person you talk to for the book. That's the first part. And second, just an interesting story from the book that you would like to share.
Sure. I really enjoyed talking to Mike Penny, who is a longtime scout and eventually assistant general manager for the Canucks. He was with the Canucks for decades, so I was able to talk to him about draft picks dating way back into their history, all the way up until more recent times. He gave me all sorts of insight about the Naslund trade and the things like that. So he was really interesting to talk to and just a wonderful, wonderful person. which makes me feel a little bit bad because I had to poke holes in his story about how the Canucks drafted Pavel Bure. But that's a whole thing. That to me is the Pavel Bure chapter is one of my favorites in the book because I uncovered some things that I don't think anyone has written about before. Some things that might be a little controversial, might make Brian Burke want to punch me. I don't know. We'll see. But Mike Penny was one of the guys who was instrumental in the Canucks drafting Pavel Bure. So he was just fascinating to talk to. Really enjoyed that conversation. As for stories, there's lots of really interesting stories in the book. I really enjoyed writing about the Sedin chapter. I think a lot of people are aware of most aspects of how the Sedins were drafted. But to me, one of the more interesting things was that there was this whole thing with the Tampa Bay Lightning and their ownership that nearly scuttled the entire thing. That there was this last minute, literally on the eve of the draft, the Lightning finalized a sale and transferred ownership to this new ownership. And I talked to people and I found these old quotes that basically said, if that didn't happen, the trade that gets the Canucks both Sedins probably doesn't happen. And so is this literally like at midnight, the night before the draft, there's this thing that happened that had nothing to do with the Canucks. But if that doesn't happen, the Canucks probably don't get both Sedins. And that to me was fascinating, that there was all these other things happening behind the scenes that we didn't really know about that kind of shaped the history of the Canucks in really profound ways. Yeah, there's lots of crazy stories in the book that I'm excited for people to read. One of my favorite things that I found is that, you know, everyone has this idea of the wheel that was spun that lost the Canucks Gilbert Perreault. And the way that story is told is just 100% wrong. And just in small ways, just silly things like, oh, they thought the number was 1 and it was actually 11. Well, there was no ones on the wheel at all. Was one of my one of the things everyone thought, like, oh, they spun the wheel and it landed on a 1. Literally impossible. There were no ones on the wheel. So I don't know. There's just all sorts of random things that I found that I just don't think are out there. And I tried to tell kind of the definitive story of each of these draft stories, whether it's Dale Talon, Stan Smeal, Trevor Linden, all of those players. Like, I tried to tell the definitive story of how those drafts happened, kind of cut through some of the legends and myths that surround a lot of these players. And what I found is that a lot of those legends and myths, well, yeah, they're actually true. You know, Trevor Linden did skip a medical testing thing with the Canucks because he was helping his family brand skiers. That is a true story. That happened. You know, so some of those legends and myths that we hear about were 100% true, and those were kind of fun to find out about and get the whole story behind them. And some of them, like how Pavel Bure was drafted, the story that we have out there isn't really true at all. And so people will have to read the book to find out why that is the case.
Leaving it on a cliffhanger, and I absolutely love it. Daniel, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. And yeah, the book is On the Clock, The Vancouver Canucks, and it's by Daniel Wagner. And you can go buy it next week in all those bookstores. And I'm going to Daniel Wagner's house to pick up mine. But Dan, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.